All right, folks, it's 7:01, so let's get started. Thank you all for being here this evening. Um, my name is Ken Rosenthal. I'm a park naturalist at Gulf Branch Nature Center. Just a reminder that I am recording this presentation and it'll be posted later on YouTube. So if you need to peel away suddenly or miss something, you'll be able to watch it again. Um, I always feel like it's best to get questions in the heat of the moment. So please feel free to unmute and ask me a question if you have one. You could pop it in the chat, but I probably won't be seeing the chat till the end of the presentation. So I want to throw that idea out there. So we're going to go ahead and get started, and I'm going to share my screen. And tonight we're going to talk about community science. And you probably hear most people refer to it as the majority of people refer to it as citizen science, but I'm hoping that eventually we can move that needle a little bit because I just think community science has a nicer ring to it. Excuse me. I like to start my programs off when I talk about community science, when I talk about iNaturalist. Any of those things, I'm really passionate about it. I feel like that a lot of people everybody has something to give when it comes to this subject, and I don't always know that people are aware of that. This is ooh, I think one I remember it's like Robinson's carpenter worm moth. It's a really large moth, and I remember spotting it on the back step of a nature center I worked at prior to working here, and I was fascinated by it and wanted to know what it was. So I took a bunch of pictures. Eventually, ended up buying a moth book because I was so excited by all the moths I was finding while trying to find this one, and it just kind of steamrolled from there. So literally this individual is kind of what got me involved with some of the citizen science stuff or the community science stuff I do right now. So I want to define it a little bit and give you some examples. And I found some really interesting ones. And then I've got some opportunities or some opportunities to share, but also some interesting stories of different projects that you may or may not have heard of. I think this is a nice quote from Aldo Leopold, and it's just about you do what's right not because it makes you a lot of money or makes you famous but because it's what's right. um and so um I think this was probably meant more for people with an environmental bent to make sure we're doing right by the environment and doing conservation and doing good things, but I also think it applies to community science because um there sometimes it takes so little to really do community science, but it can have a major impact in a bigger pool. Kind of, think of, there's 2 pennies in your pocket might not make a difference for you on so many levels, but collecting 2 pennies from everybody in a community can amount to a big amount of money that could really help some cause or somebody else out. So it's all these little bits that make this much larger pool of information. So what is citizen science or community science? It is a collection and analysis of data relating to the natural world by members of the general public, typically as part of a collaborative project with professional scientists. Um, this is right from Oxford Dictionaries. That's I put that there, but it's a really nice and very direct definition of it, and it's involving members of the public to get involved with science. And you'll sometimes hear debate between researchers and people about how important or how accurate or how valuable that information collected can be, but it can be very, very valuable. And in some of the projects that I'll talk about, simply you might be where a professional scientist or a researcher or an observer is not, and you'll get to see or experience something that they haven't seen. But if you're able to record it in a valuable way, it can still become part of their data set, and that can be invaluable in on many different levels. Excuse me. Here's a couple more places to look at: citizenscience.org, and then nationalgeographic.org has a citizen science page, and I can come back to those later or email those to everybody when we're finished if you're interested in those links. Um, Science, and certainly some of the pieces of citizen science can be really powerful for answering certain questions. You might think of a frog species that you used to hear a lot in your neighborhood or where you grew up, or just in general, and then maybe at one time it just seemed like they were always around, and you're always hearing them, and then all of a sudden you're only hearing a few or you're not hearing any. That doesn't really mean we have a frog catastrophe or a frog crisis on our hands. What we need to do, this is called anecdotal evidence. And sometimes anecdotal evidence can lead to a question, it can lead to a better collection of data, but anecdotal evidence isn't always a good data point. But it can lead to those questions we want to ask, which is, are those frogs still around? Are they still in the similar populations? And or is their habitat gone, or we're just not hearing them anymore, or are they dying out because of some pressure that we're not aware of? So there are different ways that you can do citizen science. There are inventories, things like a BioBlitz, where they're collecting data, like what are we finding in this area? So they send a lot of people out. Many eyes can spot many more things, and take pictures. And nowadays, this is one of those things where you can take a picture. You can take 17 pictures of the same bug with your cell phone. So you can have tons and tons of pictures from every angle if you really want to, providing the bug's not moving very fast. Maybe 17 pictures with all different angles of a mushroom or a plant or something that's not as mobile. But certainly you can do a kind of BioBlitz, where during a specific period of time in a specific area, you're looking to catalog everything you see that's living there. Or maybe it's only for a specific group, like maybe it's just it's a BioBlitz, but it's only birds, or it's only bugs, or it's only flowering plants. And this was a example of the 2018 Arlington County BioBlitz. We were just trying to catalog everything we found, the flora and the fauna, in this case of Glen Carlin Park. Um, Sometimes these projects or similar projects can be really important for early detection of invasive species. It can be as simple as keeping an eye out for certain kinds of plants or bugs, or even fish or birds that are starting to pop up, and reporting them if you see them. It can also be similar for species that are of interest, species that might be vulnerable or threatened or endangered. And if you see them, species that are in decline, and if you see them, let's please report them. This is the Virginia Herpetological Society's website, and they have at the bottom, they have buttons for reporting eastern box turtles if you see them. They have buttons for reporting sightings of spadefoot toads, because these are species of concern. They're also, might be some question as to how many are really out there. And so getting this data in specifically on certain critters can help us have a better understanding of their populations and where they're being seen and found. And you can do monitoring, bluebird nest boxes or other nest boxes, or looking for nests and then reporting what you find in the nest. And so this can be important for phenology and timing, and seeing if there's a change earlier or later in the timing of birds nesting. But you can also do this for plants. You can also do this for insects and when they're coming out. Like I said, I just chose this one because it was one that I had done, but I also had pictures for from the Virginia Bluebird Society has trails all around the state, and they have volunteers that go out and monitor the boxes and check them once a week, and report what they're finding and the success or failure of the nest. And so they got a pretty rich, I should think they would have a pretty rich data set, especially from around the state, which is really a really nice thing to see how they're doing. So it's all about the data. You can help to establish baselines or take snapshots, help to recognize natural patterns. Are there time shifts, earlier late trends in blooming, migration, emergence, things like that? Are there geographic changes in population distribution, increasing or decreasing populations, or even the discovery of invasive species? Have they been established? Are they breeding and reproducing? Um, I think you can also see that, sometimes if you're looking especially at those first three under recognized natural patterns, you can also see these are pieces that we're looking at that can be affected by something big like climate change. So time shifts and geographic changes, increasing, decreasing populations, can also see this. Increasing and decreasing populations can be a lot of different things. That can be loss of natural predators, really resulting in increasing populations. Decreasing population can be a result of climate change. It also can be a result of invasive species. It can be a result of loss of habitat. It can be a result of pollution or changes to the environment that other than climate, although that's obviously one as well. And so sometimes you can say we're seeing more or less of something, but we need that data. We need to know if it's there to begin, if the organism is there to begin with, if it's um, was it there, is it there now, and what numbers is it in, and can we figure out historically maybe how many there were as well, because that can be all important, because you don't want to work hard to protect or reestablish a species if it was actually never here. And so these are all pieces that need to be answered. There's a whole lot more questions in science, questions about data, than there are actual researchers, and sometimes you can start collecting this data even though you don't have the questions, and someone comes along and says, I want to ask this question, and boom, you've already got a data set. And I'm going to talk about some of these as we move on here. But this is really about data and collecting data or analyzing it. So often you're going to start with a scientist or a researcher who's defining the question and designing a protocol. Okay, once they've designed a protocol, they can train volunteers, other staff obviously as well, in the protocol, how to collect the data, how to report the data. They can even have people help, volunteers help analyze it depending on what kind of data is being collected. So volunteers that learn the protocol are going to collect and report the data. They can also possibly analyze the data, again, depending on the project. And then they also get to see the results. So that the analysis of the data can be shared, or can be a two-step process where it's organizing and analyzing all the data that has come in. And then once it's organized, then passing that back to the scientists and researchers who do a second kind of analysis to see what's actually being found, and then they share and publish a report. One of the books I was reading, which I'll also share later, they mentioned that for a lot of research and for a lot of community science, the hard cash, if you will, the big reward is scientific papers. And so when you can generate data that ultimately can be analyzed and written into papers, that's really, really, it's really worthwhile to do that. And again, this can also be, this kind of collection and analysis of data can also be important for governmental groups, like, I don't know, Arlington County. But any county or state or even federal group that is looking to get data or find information, and they either don't have the staff, probably likely, don't have the budget, very likely, and so doing a large scale survey of a certain species or a population or habitat is sometimes more feasible when you can have volunteers that are trained in the protocol and able to do that legwork for you. So this can be really, really invaluable. And again, if you're a researcher on birds, but you're in the office, you're writing emails, you're going to committee meetings, you're doing all these other things, you're teaching, you're have all these other duties beside that cuts down on your field time. And so if you're not in the field, you're not seeing things. Whereas when you have all these other people that are out birding, that are just wildlife watching for fun, they can also submit information that's going to be valuable to you, because they're where the data can be generated, and then they can share it. And so that can be a big deal, because if you're a researcher, if you're a scientist, you only be in one place at a time. But the more people you have helping you, and the more volunteers that can provide that information, the more chance you have to get to find the information that you want or that you need to answer your questions. For those of you that are sitting here at home wondering why citizen science, and this is the big question. If any of you are in Arlington, Master Naturalists, hopefully you're lifelong learners. If you're here, hopefully you're a lifelong learner. You're always looking for something new and something interesting. Citizen science can help you learn. You can be involved in something bigger. It's a way to give back. It's a way to make a difference. You can meet other people with same interests, so you can be a little bit of networking. It's a good way to know what is happening and going on around you. And so far my angle on this is definitely obviously natural history and topics that involve organisms, plants, and animals. And there are some other citizen science pieces I'll share as well later on. But tends to be, because I'm in a nature center, this tends to be my focus when I'm talking about citizen science or community science, is a lot of these questions that involve plants, that involve animals. This is a really neat one. This is a gentleman named William. I never looked it up, and I'm not sure if I can find it. So I don't know if I should say Wewell or Wool. But he was kind of a jack of all trades, did a lot of interesting things, had a a finger in many different things. But in the mid 1800s, he was working on this project where he wanted to understand better the tides and the movement of water in the Atlantic. And I have some notes here, so I apologize if I'm reading a little bit. But he was a pioneer in citizen science. He wanted to get this tidal information, and he needed it from places around the world. And again, this is I can't remember if this is, I think 1833 or 1835. It was 1835 when he got this information. So we're not only are we before email and internet, we're before phone. And what it took to send these letters around. But what he did is he arranged for volunteers at more than 650 tidal stations to follow his specific instructions for measuring tides around the clock at exactly the same points in time for 2 weeks in June of 1835. And this was a massive undertaking, and he was successful. He got this information back. He answered some questions. This is one of the maps that was generated. I think here in the left at about 9 o'clock, you can see Oxford. This is the North Sea, so I think this is Netherlands here on the right, and obviously Amsterdam. And the left here, you can see Yarmouth and Oxford. So and Dover. So my geography is not very good, but I'm guessing this is obviously between the Isles there, the British Isles, and obviously the mainland of Europe. But he got information all around the Atlantic, sent all these letters out. Everybody sent this back. This had to be amazing. And one of the other things that was interesting is he got so much information, he actually had to hire calculators to do the math that he needed. Okay, and this was, in all likelihood, very much a hobby. Science was at this time not a career. It was something that was more likely to be worked on by people of leisure, meaning people that were wealthy, that had time on their hands to follow these pursuits. And one other interesting thing that came out of it is that he was the first person to coin the term scientist. And he did that as a chivalrous move because he had at least one person working under him who was a woman, and he did not want to refer to her as a man of science. And so the funny part about this in this book that they make, the point that they make is that it's interesting to note that the first person referred to as a scientist was a woman, so technically the first scientist was a woman. But regardless of all that point there, I think it's interesting that term was coined in this experiment. This was a massive undertaking. This happened 185 years ago or so, 187 years ago, and it was done without the internet. But I have a hard time arranging my friends to get one thing done with all their schedules, and that's just getting 3 or 4 people together. We do it on an annual basis, and we still struggle. And he arranged for this information from 650 points around the Atlantic Ocean. And so I just thought that's really interesting. As I mentioned at the end, I'm going to share a book with you, and it has a lot more information on this and how he did it. A lot of really good citizen science work that was done, that's been done. But I just thought that was incredible that he accomplished this, in a time before electronic communication, when it was definitely a lot of writing and a lot of work to get all that get that protocol out to everybody, and then get all that information back. I didn't even have copy machines, so somebody was writing all these letters. It's astounding to me. In North America, our longest running community science project is the Audubon Christmas bird count. Gentleman, the last name of Chapman down there in the corner, is one of the first people to suggest the Audubon Christmas bird count. And what he was trying to do was, how do I put this nicely? He thought it wasn't the best tradition to go out on Christmas Day and shoot a bunch of birds for no reason, which is kind of what people did. They had these little Christmas Day hunts where they'd go out and shoot birds randomly and for no reason, whether they're common or rare or scarce. They typically didn't even eat them or mount them or harvest the feathers, anything like that. It was a sport to go out and shoot as many birds as you can in a contest to see who could shoot the most birds. which I have lots of comments on that, but it's just not something I think that was great. And so he thought, hey, here's a great idea. What if we went out and counted the birds instead of killed them and see how many we could find? And thus was born the Audubon Christmas bird count. That was 1900s. We're on 2022, so we'll be heading into the 123rd iteration of that at this point, and that's amazing. And they've gotten some incredible information from that and seen some changes and some number differential. And again, so to be fair, I'm interested in birds. And so, when I'm looking for something I want to do for citizen science, I like to go out and do some birding. I get distracted by bugs and reptiles. So if I can, find information out about that as well, that's even more exciting. So what I kind of want to dovetail this in was, if you're looking to do community science, find something that piques your interest. Like I said, I like birding. I get really motivated by lists and numbers and seeing how many things I can find, and comparing myself to other people. They don't know they're in the competition with me, but they are. And eBird is a place where you can keep a list wherever you go. You can make a list for every outing, and you can submit it to eBird. eBird will keep a list of everything you've seen in every list that you've sent, and so you can suddenly have a life list through eBird. You can have here's how many species I've seen. Oh, those are actually my stats right there. So how many checklists I've done, how many species I've observed, the number of photos I've sent. I haven't done any audio. My 2-day checklist streak. But they're also going to take your data, your information about the site you were at, the time you were at, not just the time of day, but the time of year, the birds that you saw, the number of birds that you saw. If you add breeding codes, they're going to use that data as well, and they're going to lump that into this massive data set of all this information about all these different bird species, and they'll collect this around the world, and so they're constantly getting regular updates of all this information, and they're getting real-time information, and they can use this to look at bird populations and bird species and see where they're being seen. Are they showing up in different places? Are they showing up in new places? Are they showing up earlier? Are they showing up later? Are they increasing or decreasing in frequency? Now, again, the point to remember here is, I don't like, if I'm doing eBird's kind of at the mercy, at least as far as like my birding is concerned, of when do I have time to go make an eBird list, and then where am I going to go? That's all my choice. Tomorrow I want to go to Occoquan, I go to Occoquan. Or tomorrow I go back to work and I report on the 3 pigeons and the house finch I saw at the feeder. We don't usually get pigeons, but that might just be that they might not always get great data. But then I was in Calvert County over the weekend, and they got a bird list out of me for that one. And then Tuesday I actually went, or Monday I actually went to several places around Arlington County and did lists. So then they got some good data. So it's the strength of the data set is still kind of limited to where people are actually birding. And so their numbers might be a little different in the winter versus spring and summer, when it's nicer out and probably there's more people out doing it. But I think that they tend to get a really amazing and robust data set out of this, that they can really do some interesting things and look at some interesting trends with. They also have projects like Project Feeder Watch over here on the left, and Nest Watch, and I'll talk a little bit more about them. But again, if you're already out birding, what does it hurt to add this little extra step to what you're doing, and then you're contributing to science. Now you're telling somebody who might be using this data what you saw, when you saw it, and where you saw it. And those are data points. And the other thing that's nice is, sometimes I'll be looking for a certain bird, or decide I want to see a certain kind of bird. And I can go on here as well. So it's got uses for birders that, once you're in and a member, you can check out, look at all these different tools for finding where birds are around. And as an educator, I've used some of their other tools as well. And I'll come back to that in a second. The British Trust for Ornithology has a nest record scheme that's been going on for many, many years. And we, in North America, we have a similar project called Nest Watch. Okay, I think the Nest Record Scheme is quite older, but they have both of these projects, the Nest Record Scheme and the Nest Watch, depend on amateur um, birders to get out there. And to be fair, one point that was made in the book I was reading about this is that a lot of times you have a researcher who might be really into I think the example they used was like hummingbird tongues and taste, and that's their specialty. But you take them out in the woods and they don't know maybe as many birds as you do. Maybe that's not their hobby. That's something they're working on, but that doesn't mean they also do birding on the side. And so they have that skill. And so you'll find that many birders have, have been through doing a hobby for many years and really working at, learning calls and learning field marks are really in some cases, the experts at seeing these birds. And so they're contributing to this data in a different and important way. And sometimes they're even though they might be amateurs because they're not doing it professionally, they might also be the experts. And so these two projects, again, the British Trust for Ornithology and Nestwatch, both contributed data and people using that data from these groups, I believe, wrote papers that supported some of the um, that showed that some of the expected results from climate change were actually happening. One really interesting piece was that tree swallows had started nesting up north in North America almost 9 days earlier between where they were in the late 50s, early 60s versus where they were in the 90s. Like over 20, 30 years, on average, they were nesting 9 days longer up the north, which was a pretty big number. And again, Nestwatch, by the way, started in the 60s. It's also through Cornell Lab of Ornithology. And it was a result of a couple people reading another book called Silent Spring. So these voices of citizens are out there, and there's a lot of things we can get done if we work together. Where Silent Spring was, talked about the pesticides and how it was having effects on the environment, and this was really moving, and it caused a couple of gentlemen to start this Nestwatch program, which is still going strong, and which is really interesting. Was there a no, there was, and then you could see here, I don't know if you can see my cursor, but this on the right, under featured content, the last one at the bottom, scientific impact, research requests, publications, and more. So not only are they getting data, but they're getting data that they can use to view the natural world and see what is happening in it right now. This is my favorite thing from eBird. I do the ornithology for the Arlington Master Naturalist basic training, and I love showing these because this is relative abundance. So you've got to have people out there looking for the birds, which you do. Like I said, they do get a lot there, but this is you can see right here under where it says modeled area, no prediction. That first line is eBird data from 2006 to 2020. And what they've done is they've compiled it into this animated map. I'm going to start it, and it's going to show how this population of blackpoll warblers, this is a small warbler, it's one of our later warblers. They're usually in our area in May. But it shows where you're being seen, and it gives you an idea of their where they move, how they move in migration, where and how and when they move. And so you can see that right now they're kind of in northern South America, and then boom, they move across the islands. They moved across the islands. They hopped into Florida, and they moved up and dispersed throughout North America. So now we're in late July, moving into August, and they're going to start moving south. And watch what happens, because they're going to go take a different. Whoops, they're going to take a. Oh, I got to start over. Sorry, and they're going to take a different path. So they're down here. They hop across, go up through Florida, come up into northern North America, and then they're all going to gather, and then whoop, they go out across the Atlantic, and hop these islands over here. So they take a different path. And that's a pretty good for a small warbler-sized bird. I think that's a couple days across the Atlantic. That's a heck of a flight. Uses a lot of resources. But they have maps for so many different species. And in fact, they have this data for so many species that they just published this map within the last month, which is really neat. All these dots are kind of an aggregate average of where that species is. So what you're seeing here for each dot is a species of bird, and they're showing the movement of these 118 species of birds throughout the year. So as the colors change, they're indicating the months at the bottom left there. So now we're in yellow is probably August and into September, and orange is the fall, and then red will be winter in December. And then it's going to restart again with a dark blue for January. Whoop, and there we go. And all the birds start moving again. And so, like I said, each dot is a species, but it's showing that some go from, South America all the way up into northern North America. And some don't. Some don't leave South America, some don't leave North America. But this data, this animation is made possible by all of the contributions of all of these people who are doing these birding checklists for all these different species that they're seeing. And again, like for me, pretty much my birding happens right here in our area, in the Delmarva area. But those contributions are still a part of this, and so it's kind of neat. It's neat for me because I get to use this obviously in programs like this, but it's also neat to think that I did observations for probably some of these species, and now it's showing up in this map, and I just think that's fantastic. And again, millions of data points from birding checklists from all these different people, so that's fantastic. Yeah, but maybe birds aren't your thing. Do you like butterflies? Butterflies are really pretty. You can find several different projects online where they're gathering information about moths and butterflies. This is kind of the acronym is BMONA, Butterflies and Moths of North America. I thought it was interesting to share this because I like this paragraph they have on the right about data quality, where they state that data quality for a citizen science project is only as good as its weakest record. And so you have to submit a photo. You can't just be like, hey, I saw a monarch yesterday. It was pretty. They want a photographic piece of photographic evidence for every submission of a sighting that you put into their project. And then they also want to make sure that they can identify the butterfly or moth from that photo. And I know that there are some species that simply you can't get to species just by photo. And they do say at the bottom in that last line, you might have to collect a specimen so we can examine it for further identification. Excuse me. And so, I wouldn't do that. I'm not going to collect each one when I take the picture. But I thought that was kind of an interesting little piece there, because there is a lot of talk about the limits that you will have with a citizen science project. And that apparently is one of them. So if you don't want to do, but maybe you don't want to do butterflies and moths, or you like all bugs, here's another place where you can submit your insect pictures and have them added to data points. You can also browse through quite a massive catalog of photos to try to identify the bug that you've seen. Up here on that first row there under where it says bug guide in the upper left, you can see the third one over says ID request. You can submit pictures to try to get an ID of what you were seeing as well. And that worked really great. This was where I went to after I discovered that moth, that first thing. This was the piece I got in next. I started putting a bunch of pictures in here because I was getting IDs, and it was really, really neat. But that was before I discovered iNaturalist. And iNaturalist isn't for birds, it isn't for butterflies, it isn't for bugs, it's for everything living. And I think that's what's really, really cool. And I took the screen grab this afternoon, so that is up to date. Over 93 million observations to date. So they're slowly pushing their way towards 1 billion, which is, oh no, they're not even, sorry. That's another place. Sorry. Towards 100 million. They're slowly pushing their way towards 100 million. I got a little excited there by the 9. But they have such a large data set that they have, I can't remember if it's an algorithm or an AI that can actually help you identify your photo when you submit it, which is absolutely cool. It's so fantastic. So when you submit something to iNaturalist as a citizen science observer, when you log in, you're telling them who you are. If you take your picture with your cell phone, it's going to automatically include when you saw it. the picture you share is the evidence of what you saw. And if you have your location services set, it'll even give them in the metadata your location, which is really helpful. And then all you got to do is take a fly at what you saw, which if you know, great, put that in. If you're not sure, it'll help you. If you're still not sure, just be general, and other people can take a look at it, because once you post, it's there for other people to see as well. And so other people can comment or add identifications or suggest ways for you to figure out what that organism is that you're looking at. And I absolutely adore iNaturalist. I think it's absolutely fantastic. I go out all the time now whenever I'm walking in nature on my own, and I'm snapping pictures constantly and trying to find stuff to add in. And I can't say that everything I take a picture of is unique. There's a lot of not duplicated efforts, but there's a lot of critters that I post more than once because you see them more often, but I see them in different places. And so I'm always trying to add things whenever I'm out to hopefully help out that data set. So here's an example of, and this is a desktop view from a PC, but here's an example of a critter I took. This was a eastern ringneck snake, or northern ringneck snake, and we actually found it in the basement of the nature center. So you can see all the data pieces there. That's who I am, the evidence of what I saw, my identification, northern ringneck snake. Here is where it was found, and then, like I said, obviously the data is observed, the data is submitted. On iNaturalist, if you have 2/3 of the people making identification are in an agreement, it becomes research grade, and I'll tell you why that's important in a second. I think I just had one other person agree with me, but 2 for 2 is 100%, so I got research grade. You can also go into projects. There will be people that might be collecting information because they want to know how these they want to know about certain areas or certain species or certain groups. So and it collects that automatically, so you don't even have to typically don't even have to add that, which is fantastic. So as soon as I popped this observation and submitted it, it went into the Biodiversity and Gulf Branch, Glee Road Park, which is a project that I started to see what was going on in the park I'm at. Went into the Global Reptile BioBlitz. It went into Never Home Alone because it was in the building, so I submitted to that. That one I had to do myself. And then Virginia Biodiversity Project, because it was in Virginia, so it automatically went in there. And so now I've contributed a data piece. It was confirmed by someone else, and then it's also in all these other projects, which hopefully people are doing something with. And again, if you're in these projects, you can look at them many times. So you get that education piece as well, more learning, which is fantastic. Here's what else is really neat. So they have a data quality assessment, and they have this for each one. You don't have to read this. Each one, but it's there if you ever want to look at it, or if you're a researcher and you're trying to find out if this is a good piece or not, or if you're just interested in where some things are. You can also check this to see the quality grade assessment. And again, like I said, is the date specified? Yes. The location? Yes. There's a photo. The ID is supported by 2 or more people. The date is accurate. The location is accurate. The organism is wild. That's a big one, because you can also put in cultivated stuff, and they ask you, like if you're putting something that's in someone's yard, or you're taking a photo of something that's in the zoo, by all means, please let them know that this is not it is not in the wild. So got a good evidence. Is it recent? And then is the community tax on its species level or lower? Because sometimes you can't get past genus or even class depending on the quality of your evidence. So that's something to keep in mind as well. And then once it's research grade, it is featured on the Global Biodiversity Information Facility. And I don't think that's my next slide, but I will come back to that. It is my next slide. There we go. So once something is research grade in iNaturalist, it goes to the Global Biodiversity Information Facility. And I posted this because this is the website. I've never actually used it or looked at my stuff. I think I might have tried to explore it once, but it's not the interface I'm interested in. But what I wanted to show was 2.15 million or billion occurrence records. Okay, when I did a program and I pulled this screen grab last spring, so not quite a year ago, this was at about 1.3 or 1.4 billion. So there's a lot of it almost increased by nearly 50%, or maybe more than 50% in 1 year. So there's a lot of information coming into it. But you can see here, over 68,000 data sets, 1,813 publishing institutions, but more importantly here, over 7,000 peer-reviewed papers are using that data. So your citing of whatever goes to iNaturalist, somebody confirms it, so now you've got it down to species, and it ends up in this set of data, and that's usable by researchers all around the world. And it's just fantastic that you could be like, oh, I don't know what kind of snail this is, and you took a picture, and next thing you know, it's a piece of data in someone's paper, which is really neat. Like I said, I visit. I don't know if I said this earlier, but I visit family up north, and sometimes I'll take pictures while I'm up there. And I took a picture of, oh, I think it was a kind of moth, and I ended up getting somebody send me a message on iNaturalist asking me questions about it, wanting to make sure it was wild, or what county I was in, and then they were including that observation in one of the paper they were writing about that group of, maybe it was caddisflies. Anyways, whatever it was some kind of insect, and I thought that was really neat, and that I had hopefully helped and contributed somebody to writing a paper about something local there. Oops, there we go. And again, so like if you took this picture and use it on Bug Guide, you would need to crop it right so it's pretty much just the insect showing. You know, that's what they want. You don't necessarily have to do that with iNaturalist. They don't have any rules about cropping. But you're always, I think we all hope, we have a nice clear photo like this. It's a really good photo, and you can see all the characteristics that you need, and that can be, obviously that's a win-win as far as getting identification. Sometimes with things like plants or mushrooms, you want to get a couple angles so that you can see different features that are really, really important. But sometimes even with a picture like that, we can't get down to species. This moth on the left is part of a genus where if you want to get a species, about the only thing you can do is dissect them, specifically dissect their genitalia. Not really my thing, so I'm going to happily stay at genus there. Plus, I don't want to have to kill the moth, and it's not like I was doing, a super intensive um, study of moths there. I saw this pretty moth on the door, and I took a picture, and it contributed it. And I can't get any farther than genus, and I'm going to be okay with that. But the same is true for this bird here on the right. And I think a lot of you are like, yeah, it's a crow. We actually have two species of crow in our region, and the best way to tell them apart is by their call. So sometimes, again, with a good picture, you can't get down to species. Sometimes with not very good pictures, but if you've got more than one, and you can get enough, you can make out enough ID marks, you can still get an ID. This is a spotted sandpiper. None of these pictures are going to grace the cover of any magazine or even the article inside, but it was enough to get me a research grade on iNaturalist, and it was ended up going into Birds of the World Project, the Natural History of Alabama, some Wildlife of Alabama project, and you can see the name of the park is Limestone Park here. This is down near Birmingham, and into the Wildlife of Limestone Park. So I still, contributed this, and it was a good piece of information, hopefully for those projects, and it was also, one more observation for me as well. There are all kinds of projects that you can find on there, projects that collect um, audio observations, projects that collect reptiles or birds or insects, projects that can collect very specific groups or very specific locations. We have several projects of some of the parks here in Arlington that go in automatically. So that's always fun to see. We've got almost 7,000 observations in Gulf Branch and Glebe Road Park with over 1,250 species, which is really neat because, it's a pretty urban park, even though it's a natural area. We're surrounded, we're bordered on the very edge of the park by lots and lots of backyards. And so it's neat to see that diversity in the neighborhood with so many people still around and so many people using the park. Sometimes you can have really big activities like the City Nature Challenge, which has happened 5 or 6, 7 years now. And this past year, um, going to come back. This past year, we had over 52,000 people participate. They observed over to 45,000 species with 1.27 million observations in the 4-day period, and that was in 300 or 400 cities around the world. Really spectacular stuff. And again, here, this year's is going to be from April 29th to May 12th. And then from May 3rd to May 8th, we're going to try to identify what we found, what hasn't been identified by May 3rd for those 4 days of observations. And it's kind of a friendly competition to see who can get the most people involved and the most species and the most observations. And some places have more people than others, and that's just the way it is. And some places have more biodiversity than others. But it's trying to see how much we can also get in together. And again, I'm pretty sure the current count is over 400 cities around the world in over 40 countries as well. So I think this is fantastic. It's just a really neat thing to be a part of, and to know that those 4 days when you're out taking observations, there's thousands of people around the world doing the same thing in all kinds of different areas. Some other examples of science. This was so cool to me, and I had never heard of this. There is a group called the Science Cheerleaders. It's a nonprofit organization, but they wanted to empower young girls to see that they could, pursue their dreams in STEM, but they didn't have to not be, if they want to be cheerleaders, they can do that as well. One of the interesting things I thought was really neat is I think it was 2013, 2014, they were out at games for the Philadelphia 76ers, and they were throwing out t-shirts to people, and inside the t-shirt was a microbe collection kit. And they were encouraging people to take a collection, collect microbes off of the soles of their shoes or their cell phone, and use that collection and then mail it in to researchers who were then looking to see what was there, and they were getting a map of how these microbes travel around on us, and what kind of microbes they are as well. And I thought that was just fantastic. In fact, one of those cheerleaders, one of the founders, her name is Darlene Cavalier. She's the first author here on this book, and she wrote this book with two other women, The Field Guide to Citizen Science, all about how you can contribute to scientific research. And it's fantastic. And there's so many people that are doing projects like this. But I thought that one was really neat, that they would, at a sports arena, it's the last place you expect someone to be like, hey, by the way, can you swab your shoe so we can see what kind of microbes and germs are living on there. In fact, one of their promotional pictures on the Science Cheerleaders website, if you go to can't remember if it was blog or in the news, but it showed one of the cheerleaders swabbing the bottom of Buzz Aldrin's shoe at some fancy event, and I thought that was really neat as well. There's a lot of apps that you can use to get involved as well and contribute. This one in particular is a mosquito alert. And the example I saw, this was in Barcelona, but I think around the world, they're looking for identification of mosquitoes, whether you've been bit or whether you see a mosquito. If you can identify it, they give you the information for that as well on how to do it. But they're trying to track certain kinds of mosquitoes, and they also obviously have an interest in um, what diseases they may or may not be carrying or transmitting or moving around the globe. So I thought that was really neat as well. And again, something very simple. I got bit by a bug. Well, why don't you tell somebody about it? Um, Weather. Okay, I focused a lot on insects and organisms. Hopefully you recognize our third president, Thomas Jefferson. In 1776? It was somewhere in the late 1700s where they talked about when he wasn't doing all these other things, and he did so many things. He was also trying to deputize every one person in every county around Virginia to get them like a thermometer and a weather vane and record the temperature and the wind twice a day, every day around Virginia, just to get this um, uh, weather information, and have a map of it and have a clear set of data, because apparently he did not like gaps in data, and so he was doing this, was almost essentially a community science project, deputized. I don't know how official that was, but trying to get somebody to do this in every county around Virginia. I thought that was fantastic. More recently, there was a nice opportunity with a growing weather pattern to do some meteorological research during one of the worst snowstorms in Denver since they started recording the weather. This was the blizzard of 2000. I'm not going to remember, and I'm going to cheat because I got the book right next to me. Unless I can't find the right page. I think this was 2013. And what they had was something called an upslope. And I'm sorry, 2003. They had an upslope, and this was this massive, um, I think it was warm air blowing in across the plains and going up the slope and hitting the cooler air and condensing. And in Denver, they had some serious precipitation, but in the front range and on the slopes, even worse. I mean, you can see this is Coal Creek Canyon. This is like 6 or 7 feet of snow there. Just ridiculous amounts of snow. This is heavy, wet snow. There's millions of dollars in insurance claims from collapsed roofs and damage all around the area. It took several days to dig out. And I think that was the beginning of a blizzard that may have moved across the country as well. But this is a really big snowstorm in March of 2003. Um, and again, a couple researchers got out ahead of it. They realized that the conditions were right for this kind of weather, and they mobilized through email. This is 2003, so not they mobilized through email all these volunteers to get them to get their gauges out and record the precipitation and when it was happening and how often it was happening, how quick it was happening. They got a gold mine of data out of this snow event, which was described by one uh, weather person. I can't find it, but it was an anomalous climactic. It was maybe catastrophic snow event. It was just a massive snow event, and they got a really good data out of this because they were able to mobilize people quickly because of that. Certainly you can't send a bunch of handwritten letters with protocols that'll take 3 months to get all around the world like William Whewell did with the tide charts. But in this day and age now we can mobilize people quickly, especially if you've already got those protocols out there and you've already got what is expected of them to record, and you can get them to be like, hey, this is gonna be weather. And apparently, everybody she sent the email to is also like, hey, by the way, I'm probably gonna go into the grocery store and get some milk and some food and some propane and be ready. Because a lot of people were without power for several days as well. But they got good data out of this and helpful data to understand what's happening and to be ready for the next time that occurs. You know what? Let's say you don't want to go out. You don't want to record the weather. You don't want to go out. You don't want to look at bugs or birds or any of that stuff. You just want to sit at home where you're comfortable. You can do that too. Um, if you go to zooniverse.org, last time I was there, and I think I still saw some of them there. There are projects where people have game cameras up in parks, and it can be parks in Africa, it can be national parks in North America, but they have game cameras up in parks, and they generate tons and tons of photos. Sometimes it's a leg, sometimes there's nothing there. And they put these photo sets up on this website, and they give you a key, like, here's what we have in the park. Let us know if it's this, is it the whole animal, how many animals, or is it nothing, or is there nothing you can see, and you mark that as well. And so you can go through, and I remember doing this with one of the parks in Africa, and it was really neat because I didn't know a lot of those critters, and so I was learning some new antelope, because I'll need to know that for tomorrow. When am I going to use it again? But it was really fun to look at it and see what they were seeing along these roads in these parks in Africa. And so that was a really fun view into somebody else's park, and I was contributing by helping analyze and manage their data set, because they're generating all these photos. And that just take time. And if you don't have this time for staff to do that, especially at these parks where they might have bigger issues like poaching, but they can set up a camera that's automated that picks up all these images. And then somebody in Virginia is sitting there, with too much time on their hands, like, hey, let me go through the park photos in South Africa and see what they're seeing in their parks. And there are many other similar opportunities like that where you can do citizen science from your desktop or laptop. I think most people, if you talk about the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, the SETI project, they think of this big radar array and telescope, and all these signals sending out and trying to receive and listening for anything. But a lot of people don't realize is one of the things that they've done for many years is gotten people to volunteer to link their home computer up to this network where they can expand the size and ability of um, their computers to analyze all the data that's coming in by using this I can't remember the name of the term, this system of all these different computers. And so they can exponentially increase their computing power and their working power by using all these computers at home. And all you do is you leave your computer on, you set the little app or whatever, and allow them permission to use some of your power. Uh, and you walk away, but you're contributing to this project. It's obviously it's very passive. It's not like you're identifying or doing anything actively, but you're contributing to the project by allowing them to use your computing power while you're not using your computer to work towards this, analyzing all the data that's coming in on the satellite. There's also a project called Folding at Home, and it's the same thing. Can you let us use your computer so it can run, our software can run on it, and it can link up to all these other computers, and we can expand the power of this so we can start doing studying the folding of all these different proteins for things like cancer, so this is cancer research. And all you do is be like, yeah, I downloaded this app, and then you leave your computer on when you're not doing stuff so that they can use your computer power. I just think that's fantastic. um One of the things I want to say, and this is something I got really excited about. I would not have been taking pictures of so many different critters if I wasn't so interested in iNaturalist. If I didn't want to see all these different things, if I didn't want to increase my list, there's a lot of different reasons, but I wouldn't be doing that and taking pictures of all these different things I see if I hadn't been interested in Bug Guide and ultimately iNaturalist. So when I was up in Massachusetts, I never would have taken this picture if I wasn't interested in iNaturalist. And what I ended up taking a picture of was this leafhopper whose scientific name is Davisonia major. And it turns out that this is the only photographic record of it on iNaturalist, and it's also the only one on Bug Guide, which is really, really cool. Again, obviously they know of it because it had a name, but nobody has reported it. And so it was really neat to find that. The gentleman who identified it was like, you need to put this on Bug Guide. So I ended up putting it on Bug Guide. And last I checked, it's still the only record on either one. So that's my photo as the species photo. If it ever shows up, if anybody ever, adds it again. And I thought that was really neat. And that could be something you could end up wandering into too. There's a lot of things that I've seen from doing this that I hadn't expected. I I wouldn't have seen this jumping spider eating a house spider if I hadn't been looking for stuff to report. I wouldn't have seen this house spider eating a young skink. I would not have seen this dragonfly eating a damselfly. I probably would not have realized that this is a striped mud turtle instead of not a regular, but a just eastern mud turtle. And it turned out that this is the northernmost point that it was reported in Virginia, and it's one of the northernmost records of it as a species, which is really, really neat. At least on iNaturalist. Maybe it's in other places, but I got really excited by that. I wouldn't have noticed these snapping turtles mating if I hadn't been out and about looking for things to report. And I certainly would have missed this tiny little click beetle. Those pink things behind it are actually my fingers, and those are the dermal ridges on my fingers. So you can see just how tiny this little beetle is. But I took that picture and put it up, and the gentleman that ID'd it was like, "Nice find," and I was like, "Oh, that was an interesting comment." So I went and looked, and it's one of only 7 observations of this on iNaturalist, and only the 3rd one in Virginia. So, you might take a picture of a bug or a turtle or a snake or a bird and not think much of it, but you put it up on iNaturalist, and it could be an important data point for something that people don't realize is here or haven't seen in these areas. And again, like I said, I get really into iNaturalist. So this is for more information. There's citizenscience.org, which I showed earlier. Stream monitoring. This is something you can do with um, Arlington. They'll train you and get you set for that. There's things like Frog Watch and Amphibian Watch that are monitoring programs for amphibians. This one, Amphibian Watch is through the U.S. Geological Survey. This one looks like it's AZA, which I think is the American Zoological Association. Again, I mentioned the reporting of the different species on the Virginia Herpetological Society. Zooniverse I showed you, and eBird. eButterfly was another butterfly site. Journey North is all about phenology and identifying when things are blooming and emerging and migrating. There's Project Budburst, which I should get on here and I don't, which is also phenology and about when different plants and things are blooming and flowering. And again, everything, which is iNaturalist, do just about everything a living. And again, this is very centric to organismal and plants and ecology. I don't even have stuff on here for weather, meteorological reporting or things like tides and other more physical systems. So there's those opportunities as well. And this is the book I got some of my stories from, and I highly recommend it. It's a really good citizen science. And again, Karen Cooper was also one of the three authors on the Field Guide to Citizen Science book I showed you earlier. Um, so it's an enjoyable book. It's got some really good stories about it. So, and again, the important thing is not to stop questioning, but curiosity has its own reason for existence, and I think it certainly has its own reward as well. So thanks for joining me. And I always like to start and end these talks with something new. I would have never discovered these little robber flies, which are called gnat ogres, which, if I'm being honest with you, I just think is absolutely the coolest name of an insect ever. They sit on the tip of these little plants. They fly out and grab a flying insect and bring it back and eat it. I just think they're really, really cool critters. And I never would have discovered them if I hadn't been doing um, citizen science and community science, trying to find these different critters to report. So hopefully you can go out and find your new favorite critter or something soon. So thanks everybody. I'm gonna check the chat now. I'm gonna stop sharing, check the chat, see if there's any questions. But if anybody has a question they want to pop out there, there's nothing in the chat. I don't know if anybody has a question they would like to share or ask. I'm happy to take it. I appreciate y'all being here because it's a small group. So thanks for joining me this evening.